I'm Tom Dennis, the CEO of Serenity in Leadership. We're a culture change consultancy with outstanding skills in leadership development and conflict resolution strategies. As change specialists, we help businesses overcome challenges to achieve successful, lasting outcomes whilst putting their people at the heart of the business. Today, I am really happy to welcome Gamal Turawa, or as he prefers to be known, G, to this podcast. G, welcome.
Thank you, Tom. It's great to be here.
You're also one of our guest speakers, and you're going to be with us at our next dialogue on the 16th of September. And I'm delighted that you'll be talking to us about intersectionality and how labeling can enable increased discrimination or disadvantage. Because this is such an interesting subject, and I know your personal journey is very much at the forefront of this. So, G, before we find out more about how you came to be an internationally acclaimed keynote speaker and facilitator in this field, I think we need to be clear about what exactly does intersectionality mean?
Well, I think there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. There's the academic way, but for me, it's the lived experience. It's the point where different parts of your personality collide, if I can put it that way. So, for example, I'm a black gay guy. That's my physical attribute. That's my characteristics. But then there's other parts of me that also impact on that and how I interact with the world. And it's also ways in which some people feel that you can suffer multiple levels of discrimination.
Yeah, I think that's an important aspect, and I think it'll probably come out more as we chat. You've had an extraordinary life, born in the early 60s to quite an authoritarian Nigerian father and a Jamaican mother, but fostered by a white middle-class family in Kent. Presumably, that in itself had a huge impact in your journey in later wanting to look at intersectionality in your professional life.
Yeah, I think I'm at the age now where I can see all of those things gave me different gifts, but for a long time, they caused a lot of confusion. Because I didn't know which world I belonged to. I had an understanding of the white world from growing up with a white family, and then there was the Jamaican side, then there was the Nigerian side, and so all these things, they don't always merge, they clash.
Yes, at
times. I mean, if I give an example, a very small example, but it had a very profound impact. Eye contact. Right. My foster parents, I was very aware of what I was saying when I said that. My foster parents said, brought me up with that look at me when I'm talking to you aspect, right. So you learn and it becomes your conditioned behavior. When I was taken back to my natural parents, forced back to my natural parents, my father's cultural coding was a child does not look an adult in the eye. So I would speak to him, or he would call me and I would say, "Yes, Daddy," look at him, and I would get this slap around the face. And initially I had no idea what I was doing or why I was getting slapped. And then somewhere along the line, I learned that I have to look down. So I look down. I then go to school where the teacher's talking to me. I've now learned to look down. What the teacher puts on my school report is he doesn't pay attention. He doesn't listen. Right? That school report gets sent to who? My dad. Which then reinforces his view of what he thinks I am, that I'm not listening, I'm stubborn. So you get caught in this cross-cultural loop that you never really know what the rules are.
Yeah. So you have these internal conflicts.
Yeah.
That develop and grow. Do you think that they encourage other conflicts? I mean, do they build one on top of the other, do you think?
You see, for me, it's when you're living in that space, you don't separate them out. You just have a conflict. So you don't look at it and think this is part of that, or this is part of that, or this is. It's just the confusion that comes around you, and you're constantly in this place of confusion because you never know what side is going where or what's going on.
Yeah. So you joined the police force as a young adult, and it was during that time that I think you came out. You were the UK's first openly gay Black police officer. Were you supported in any way through that?
No, I mean, that is, okay. If I take it back, when I came out, it wasn't about what I needed from other people. It was about what I needed for myself. So I wasn't looking for support. I wasn't looking for understanding. I wasn't looking for, because I looked at it and thought, well, this is not yours, it's mine. That's what coming out into me. I have now owned this.
Yeah.
It belongs to me. Were there people who were understanding? Yes. In fact, the interesting thing is where I was working in the police at the time was probably the place where most people were understanding. In fact, I can say hand on heart, in all of my time in the police, I never suffered homophobia. I never experienced homophobia. I experienced racism, but never experienced homophobia.
Wow. For some reason, you surprised me. Gosh.
I'm not saying it didn't exist. I just said, for me, it was about, I think there's this element of, and this affects the way I train, because when I train, or the way I look at things, it's not about other people. It's about how we first need to understand how we see ourselves and how we've been taught to look at the world. And if I don't understand where I'm coming from, or if I don't recognize that I don't understand where I'm coming from, how am I going to be able to recognize or understand where you're coming from?
Yeah. Let's dive a little bit more into intersectionality. How does labeling increase discrimination and personal growth?
I think it's almost like people want to put you into a box. You know, we want to put people in boxes. And when you cross several boxes, it's, for some people, especially the people in organizations or in power, you become difficult to manage because we're not sure what to do with you. So you tend to fall through the cracks. You tend to miss opportunities. You tend to not be considered for opportunities because it's, you know, we're not sure whether to put you in the Black box or the Muslim box or the gay box or the gender box, or, you know, where do we put you? And then and I think that when we start to look at all those labels, we miss the person. You know, all of those things make me, you know, if you try, you can't separate them out. I'm just G.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the problem, is that we well, is G the Black guy? No, he's the gay guy. Is he this? No, is that? Oh, I don't know what G is. G is just G.
Yeah. Has the pandemic affected intersectionality?
Oh, that's. I know it's going to sound like a very Neil Kinnock type answer. Yes and no. It's a difficult question because I think, has the pandemic affected identity? I think is the question to ask, because I think that a lot of people during this period, and I know it from my experience of speaking to us, are exploring their own identities and how they interact, and I think that's been a very interesting dynamic to look at. So whether it's intersectionality per se, I would say identity is more what people are looking at and exploring.
Because they've been forced to spend time by themselves?
Yeah, forced to spend time by themselves. to have conversations with their families if they're living with a family that they've not had before. It'd be very interesting to see how many relationships deepen or how many relationships actually fall apart as a result of this dynamic, this pandemic.
Yes, I don't know the figures on that. I know that you know, the domestic violence figures have gone way up. You have to be in a certain mindset, though, to be prepared to explore yourself.
Yeah.
You know, they said that the online media, Netflix and Prime and all that lot, have been very heavily used during the pandemic. And you know, all the time there's noise or a distraction, then the opportunity to explore yourself is frittered away.
Yeah.
In the conversations you've had, you've seen people or interacted with people who've ended up exploring themselves.
Yeah,
right?
definitely. And you know, not just through the pandemic, but through some of the issues that were raised via the pandemic, like with Donald Trump, and the Me Too movement and George Floyd. Right? All of these things cause people to actually say, where do I sit with this? And of course, people to have, you know, I've had such rich conversations with organizations, with people, with individuals, with friends who are still, you know, have now sort of like sat down and said, where does this actually fit? What does this mean to me?
Yeah.
Which I think is the biggest thing, because a lot of the time before, diversity is about the other.
Yes. Yes, I really agree with that. That sort of opens up a whole sort of train of thought there. You know, if people are beginning to explore themselves or face themselves, which I guess is the first step, do you think the help is out there for them, or the support?
I don't think there's enough help and support out there. I mean, I've got friends who are counselors, and they are actually overwhelmed at the moment. Especially now, one of the dynamics that I'm aware of through speaking to some of the friends is that Black men are now going to counseling in more numbers than they did before. And I think that whole George Floyd and, you know, the football and all these other issues around race that have come, because race came very much to the fore through this pandemic in various ways. And I think that's had an impact. It did have an impact. I mean, I know for a fact, well, this is for a fact, I had several friends ringing me up after the George Floyd who were too upset. So I set up a Black men's group online, just for people to have that space to say, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. This is, you know, it's not just about George Floyd. You know, when people are insulting the footballers, they're not insulting the footballers because it's Raheem or because it's Marcus. They're insulting them because of their color. And if you're doing that, you're insulting every person of color. So every person of color feels that pain. And if you want to bring the intersectionality part into that, you know, there's that link of sort of like, you know, I could be in that Black space talking about what it's like to feel racism, but at the same time, they become homophobic. And I'm sort of like, okay, you know, especially with some of my Nigerian religious friends, and I'm talking about my experience, is they can talk about the racism, but, you know, we won't talk about the gay issue.
Yes.
So then it makes you question, where do I belong? Where do I find that space where I fit?
Yes. It's other people's suffering that they put onto you.
But it's also yourself. You know, all of us like to have that space to say, this is the space I fit in. This is the space or the path I walk.
Yeah, if you remember, I mean, in one of our early dialogues, we talked about that under the heading of belonging.
Yeah.
Everybody has this sort of innate need to belong.
Yeah.
And it's extraordinary the lengths that people will go to, even to betray themselves, in order to find a place where they can feel that they belong, even if actually it's not safe there.
Yeah. I did that in the police. When I first joined the police, in the first couple of weeks at Hendon, the training college, some guys came into my room and said, "You are the wrong color to be in this job." And they held me down and they painted me white with shoe whitener.
Yeah.
And the thing about that experience is that I allowed them to do it because I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be part of the group. I didn't want to be seen as being on the outside. Yeah, and when you look at that, I've heard people in so many, especially people from minority groups and organizations, where I don't want to rock the boat because I don't want to be seen as a troublemaker. So I will put up with.
Tell me, because I had a similar experience when I was young, and the feeling of self-betrayal that I carried with me because I had allowed something to happen, I think has been the source of enormous pain and a kind of warping of my behavior in order to feel safe. Is that something that you resonate with?
Not, I did at some point, but I look back on those. I look back on those experiences and I think, okay, I needed to go through them to become who I am today. And that's who I was then, based on the awareness I had then. I'm not that person now. And I tend to look back on those experiences and find the learning.
Yes,
take a strength from it.
In a sense, that's all part of your intersectionality, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a fragment of who, as you said, it's who you are. It's what's made you who you are. But in terms of intersectionality, that is exactly it, isn't it? It's an aspect of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, one last question. Diversity and inclusion are very much at the center of many HR strategies these days. But we all know there's a long way to go. So what are your top 3 tips of how we can do better?
Number 1 is always engage in the conversation. Keep the conversations flowing. Courageous conversations, allow space. I think that's the most important one. Because so many times I think we get stuck in this is what I think is right, rather than are we right? The second one is, it's not about solutions, it's about progression. And it's when people say, well, tell us what we need to do, and we're doing it. So yeah, but I could tell you what you need to do, but by tomorrow something could come up and that would all go out the window. Right? It's about being able to evolve, having that ability to evolve
with an openness.
With an openness and transparency, yeah. And recognize, I think the third one for me would be recognizing that fear, shame, anger, frustration, embarrassment are all part of the process. And avoiding them is actually stunting growth. It's about being able to sit with them, because you get through them, you get to the other side, and that's where the promised land is, so to speak. Yeah.
G, thank you very much. If people want to find out more about you, where do they go?
They can go to my website, which is www.purplefrogs-connections.com.
Purplefrogs-connections.com.
Yeah.
Great.
Purple frog-connections.
Yeah. One frog.
Yeah. One frog. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's fantastic. You'll be joining us on the 16th of September. The title is I'm Just Me, Intersectionality from Behind the Label. It's at 12 o'clock until 1:30. And for all those out there who would be interested, please go to the link at Eventbrite, and we're really looking forward to seeing you. And we're really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say, G. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you.